This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed! Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Benefits Buzz. I'm so excited for this one, Hayden. You know why?
Why is that?
Because our CEO and chair, Melissa Smith.
I already knew why.
I know, you're totally setting me up, weren't you?
I mean, we need you to set it up for the audience by saying, yeah, I know, that you're just going to move on. They might be there to the show.
That's fair, that's fair. Well, I'm your host, Eric Piel. This is my co-host, Hayden. And yes, that's right, you heard us right. We have Melissa Smith, Chair and CEO of WEX on the podcast. Melissa, welcome.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm pumped to have you on the show. I was super nervous last year. I'm so nervous this season. But it's so good to do this in person.
Yes.
We are here in Florida at our large partner conference called Spark. You were on main stage, did a fantastic job this morning, and we thought, as long as you're in the building, what if we stole you and did a podcast? So thank you so much for coming.
It's so good. It's so good to be here in person.
Yes, it is.
Definitely.
Well, the cool thing is, I love what we're talking about today. We're talking about employee recognition, and you're bringing your CEO of your company. You could talk about anything, and you're talking about employee recognition. But I love it because it means so much to you. It means so much to our company. In a world right now where people are looking for what does it mean to work? Where do I work? How do we keep employees? We've had podcasts on retention interviews.
Yep.
I think recognition is such a powerful way to show employees how much you care, the value that they bring, and it's a huge thing. And I love that you're so passionate about it. And so when we found that out, we're like, absolutely, we're going to have to talk about
I'm
this.
all in.
Yes. And so I want to start by talking about some of the things that we do.
Okay.
So we have Inspire and Celebrate, right?
Yes.
Where we're able to, with this great technology platform where we make it super easy to share kudos, the great work. We have President's Club, which is our kind of a great award. And you arrived, you've got a lot of our executives are there. And so it's a big deal to you. Tell us why recognition has been such an important part to you, not only as a CEO, but for WEX.
Well, because it matters. Like when you think back to your own experiences as an employee, being seen, actually, and being recognized is an important part of why you show up every day. And so I can think about that if I think of the course of my career, and particularly when it happens when you don't expect it. There's a secret sauce in that where you're like, okay, that's where you really delight somebody when you actually bring something forward they don't expect.
I love that you said the random experiences. That's the same philosophy I take when I get my wife flowers, because it means so much more when it comes out of nowhere. If I get it on Valentine's Day, it's kind of like, right? But I love that concept, that surprise and delight of a nice recognition. Sorry, just a little anecdote. It inspired me to think about it. You're right, it does mean more.
It is very true. Like if you're the recipient of it,
Yes.
it actually sometimes it's expected, and that's nice.
Correct.
But when it's not expected, it's really nice.
For sure.
Definitely. You know, I just gave Eric a bit of a humility test, Eric. And you passed the test. You know, you just mentioned President's Club. You didn't even tell anybody that you are the President's Club award winner. So
I know.
congratulations.
I was going to drop that in here too.
All right.
It is a big deal.
Same page. We just wanted to test you. Now we know you're worthy.
No, thank you. Stop making me blush. On to the next question.
Okay.
But I love President's Club.
Yes.
For that, so I would put President's Club in that it is more expected, but it is part of the root of the culture of the company, because anybody in the company can nominate anybody else, which is a big deal, that people actually take time out of their day to do that. It's based on not just what you do, but how you do it. So how you show up. And so there's a value-based component to it. Yeah. And I think it integrates into the overall culture of the company. And the fact that anybody in the company can win is really cool.
That is very cool. If anyone can win, exactly.
Yes.
That was uplifting.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
so I'm looking forward to celebrating with you next week.
That's great.
That's great.
I love it.
You know, we heard Ken Schmidt earlier today during part of the keynote, talking about the value of culture really being driven all the way from the top. Like, you really need that top level leadership buy-in, which is a huge reason why you're here today.
Yes.
Tell us why this is so important for someone at the VP level or the CEO chair level to be really driving some of this employee recognition.
Well, culture is how you interact with people every day. It's all those little experiences. It actually isn't always the big things. And some of those little things, you talked about some of the formal programs we have, but something as simple as when someone gets promoted into a VP role, I handwrite them a note and send them a little gift. And I think that just the fact that those connection points, particularly when we live in this world where people are all over the place, so we're not all together, you're not going to be able to see each other, but making sure that people know that the work that they do matters and that someone actually notices, I think is really important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I think what Ken says, it's all about like the humanizing, right? And that moment of delight is great. And so I love that you do that. Can't wait for the day I get my handwritten. I think the work world has changed a little bit, right? A lot of organizations like WEX are hybrid, or a lot of organizations are working from home remotely. Has that shifted the way in which maybe WEX thinks about recognition, or do you have any advice for other organizations that are thinking of recognition that way?
Well, I think that in some ways it leveled the playing field, in
True.
a way that it's been interesting for us, because I always have felt like we've had a strong culture, but you had more of a sense of connectedness if you were in one of our major offices. But now what you hear from employees is they feel that connectedness almost, regardless of where they live in the world, which I think is really important that we continue that, that we make sure that we nurture that component of things as things continue. And so I think that comes with just how you treat people day in and day out, in terms of like making sure they're included. And they're included in the meetings, they're included in what we have. So I think it actually goes beyond recognition. It's making people feel like they're part of something bigger, and that they have a voice and they have an ability to actually form. Like there's this cool company that I feel like I have this great pleasure to have worked at for 25 years, but we all actually really form the future, and making sure people know that they actually have not just a role, but almost an obligation to be part of that. And I think that that's really important. So it's not just about, again, the work, it's about, the purpose and the legacy of what you leave behind.
That's so true. And culture, culture is always evolving, right? But it's definitely evolved a lot over the last 2 years with the way the office has changed. So that's an awesome point. What are some of the benefits you've seen or experienced just from top-down employee recognition, coming from all the way to the top at your level, and then obviously trickling down to all the levels of management?
Yeah, I think about it in many different tiers, I guess. Like the first are the formal programs that we've put in place over the years, and we just had to make sure that we continue to modernize that. One of the things we do a lot of is, it probably drives you crazy, but pulse surveys is like getting feedback is really important, because we're in this period of time where things are changing, and we want to make sure that we have a feedback loop and that we're doing things that matter. And with testing, some things like President's Club to me is sacred. We will not change that. But over the years, we've introduced more formal programs where things used to happen when we were smaller, informally. And so we've actually had to institutionalize some of the behaviors around that. But then on top of that, thinking about things like, distribution of stock in the company, which is an important part of how we can create wealth. Is making sure that we're being thoughtful about how we do that, and making sure that we're thoughtful about the benefits programs that we're wrapping around the offerings that we have. And so recognition is one component of that. And when we were little, it was in one room. We put people on a stage. It was easy. With 6,000 people around the globe, you actually have to think about how do you do it in a way that's entertaining and engaging and things like that. Like multimedia actually is really important. So we do a lot more video now. It was great, by the way. There was a theme and everything. We were on a journey through it. It was great, very engaging. I love that. One of the things that I talked about at the beginning of the show was recognition in regards to retention. And I don't think, I think you'd be the first to say the point of recognition isn't to retain, it's a byproduct, right? It's about celebrating someone's achievements. But at the same time, there's also a value in retention, because you're also motivated, right? Since you brought it up, right? Now that I've won, I'm like, I gotta keep up this great work, right? So now I'm motivated to keep performing at the best level that I can. Not that I wouldn't have, but there's that level. So can you talk about how you kind of view, recognition and retention and even motivation in your own thoughts? Yeah, well, I would agree with what you're saying. It's like the retention part is like the afterthought. Right. It's the defense, in this. And so we're thinking a lot more about how do you make sure people feel like they're engaged? This is a place that they want to come to work. Do they want to recommend it to other people? Is it, is it, for one of the things I care a lot about is, no, this geeky a little bit, but standard deviation, like meaning is the experience consistent for all levels of employees anywhere in the world? And so that that people are having a good experience if they're in Australia or if they're in Portland, Maine, or, and a lot of that has to do with making sure that the management is consistent about the way that they are treating the same experience. Are they living our values?
Sure.
In the behaviors, is there a match between the words and the behaviors? And I think all of those things tie into culture. Recognition is making sure that people are getting feedback, both positively and negatively. Like, honestly, like you want to make sure that if something isn't going well, that people have an early feedback loop around that, so you're cutting that off. And then when people are doing things well, that you're actually in the moment, making sure that you're recognizing what is going well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want the positive and the negative feedback, right? Like, I mean, if you're doing something that, people around you would like to see changed, or there's another way to do it and you never really thought about it, that's just as important.
Yeah, well, I think it also then makes the recognition part feel more real. Like if it's all just good, like honestly, it loses a little bit of the reality of like, it can't all be good. And so, where are the places that we actually need to lean in, and collectively, as the company has changed over the years, we all have to change the way that we behave. And I think that's like that lifelong learning curve, and you're doing it together. Like, I think that's the interesting thing about being in something is that I'm not in this alone. Other people are giving me feedback like along the way all the time. What do they like? What do they don't like? And we talked about multimedia, but I would say that's one of the things that has really evolved over the years is like people's attention spans aren't as long as they used to be, and because they just are used to so many different ways of receiving stimulation, and you actually have to have mental space for people to hear you.
I love that. Well, that's the perfect segue too. I mean, talking about company change, I was perfect going into my next question, which was basically, WEX has had a couple of recent acquisitions just on the benefits side alone. I was part of one of those acquisitions. Having gone through that experience, like, is there any tips or insights you would give our audience in terms of managing a culture where, WEX had a culture, Discovery Benefits had a culture, et cetera?
Yeah, it's interesting. Part of when we do diligence on a company, we'll look for culture. We want to see particularly how companies treat their employees and how they treat their customers. Because that relationship element is something that is something we look for. We try to see where there's gaps between our values and the company that we're acquiring, their values. We've actually, through the pandemic, one of the things we've added a lot in is creating teams that come in. And we'll have sponsors within WEX that will reach out and do these training sessions that will talk about what's it like to be at WEX, and so they can share kind of like cultural norms and things like that. And so we did that with the eNet and Optal acquisitions because it was in Benefit Express, and because all of those were done in a period of time where we couldn't travel. And so, we've really even more heavily around how do we bridge those relationships in an environment where people are remote. And making sure people understand, like, what does it mean to be at WEX? And I think that we're, it's in other places we get bigger. We're formalizing that a little bit more so people actually know, what does that mean when you come into the company? And one of the things that I've always been amazed at when we do the President's Club trip, I don't want to surprise you. What is it?
Tell me more.
One of the things I'll ask people about is their experience at WEX. And it's always shocking to me is so consistent. When they'll talk about what they like about WEX, almost regardless of where they are in the world or whether they came through an acquisition or not. What they wish would be different, that actually deviates a little bit. But the positive themes of what keeps people here, which always gives me like this great sense of, okay, there's something around cultural assimilation that actually is working, even though it's not perfect.
Yeah, right. And of validating your idea of the standard deviation, making sure that that experience is felt wherever they're located. I love that. That's great. Thanks for the insider tip, too.
You can practice and think about it.
I better have the perfect answer now.
I think this move to one WEX, too, I think that's resonating, with employees because people want to be part of something bigger.
Yeah.
And the sense of being able to share even more, I think is exciting. Yeah. And so, often when there's change, people get a little bit nervous about this. With this change, I feel like people are actually like, oh, what does that mean? I'm actually kind of excited. Who can I actually connect with even more?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe to wrap up, there's one interesting angle that I think it's really important as I think about HR professionals that are listening. Right, you talked about the importance of someone needs to take time to recognize somebody. Yes. Right, like, yes, it feels great to be recognized, but someone went out of their way. Yes. Right. If I think about President's Club or even Inspire and Celebrate, where it's really easy to send a quick note and like a fist bump and like but someone's taking time to do that. And so I've done a lot of work in the nonprofit world, and much like there's a runner's high, I know you're a runner, there's also a giver's high. Yes. Right. And there's the feeling that you get when you take time to say, hey, you did a great job, and I want to make sure you're recognized for it. Can you talk about like what can that mean for an individual, and again, that's kind of an expounding on the culture of making sure time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I have 2 tricks. I have on my calendar something called the Hour of Gratitude. Oh. Yes, so honestly, it's an hour a week. It's not.
That's great though, an hour.
Yeah.
But it's that idea that you actually have intentional time that's set aside, of making sure that you actually can focus on that. I've heard people talk about putting quarters in their pocket and actually shifting them to one side to the other in the course of the day.
Okay.
So that they're actually I think the idea is like some type of a mental trick to make sure you're doing it.
Being purposeful.
Yeah,
sure,
exactly. Right, intentional. And did I do my best at the end of the day to build relationships? Right. And part of that's recognizing.
That's a good idea too.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Occasionally we miss stuff. Did we miss anything? Do you have any final tips for our HR audience on this topic that we've kind of overlooked in our questions?
One of the things I think about is I think people undervalue the fact that you have an ability to affect how others feel and think based on your words and actions. So are you being the person you want to be in this moment? And making sure that in this world where it's hard to stay present, that being present and that in itself is actually a gift. And making sure that you're actually the person that person needs you to be in this meeting or in this, and whatever you're in at the moment. Yeah. And so I think just making sure people realize that how you show up actually matters to others.
Yeah, that's great advice for HR pros and for sluggos like you.
With your energy, right?
Yes. Exactly, right. I love that. What a great way to wrap up the episode. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again.
Yeah, thank you.
We're really excited to get this one out into the universe and share your thoughts on it. And I hope there's a lot of people who are listening who understand the importance of having someone in leadership and having them openly communicate the value of recognition in their organization. It has to be more than just the HR professional who's doing that. And you're a great example. So it's great to be part of an organization at WEX that does that here. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.